All right, well, I think people are still joining us, but I think we can go ahead and get the ball started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to my second meeting as president, and I'm also the speaker this time around. I'm speaking on Keystone plants. From what little I know about them, I've done quite a bit of research, and I've learned a lot in the past month in preparation for this. So hopefully I can pass along some of the knowledge that I've gained over the past month. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. All right, does everybody see?
There you go. Yep, right there.
Move this over to here. I probably will not be looking at the camera because I will be looking at my screen through most of this meeting. If we can, I'm going to ask people that are on the board just to keep an eye on the chat window in case anything comes in that I miss. So
Okay, sure.
We'll get rolling. All right, so I didn't like the picture that I had on the meeting announcement this month. I just put it there as a placeholder and it got kind of carried away. This is actually a picture of Bowman's Hill. If you're familiar with the nursery in that part of the state, it doesn't look like that now, as none of us have snow, I would imagine, at this point in the month. It has been quite a rainy spring, late winter so far. We've got a bunch of things to talk about so far this month. The agenda looks like this. Typical agenda for us. We're going to start with the chapter update. We'll talk about the Keystone tree order, the member survey. Some of these things look like repeats, but they're open items from last month. We'll talk about the grant updates. There's some good news to share there. We'll also talk about our April event. The thought of the month will be PA Forest, past and present. The tree of the month will be white oak. The invasive species of the month will be lesser celandine. And then I'll get into the talk on the Keystone plant. Should be about an hour. Followed by some open forum. Nothing's changed since the last meeting. I am the current president for this chapter. Susan is our secretary. Our treasurer is Denise. Judy is our membership chair, and board members include Marilyn Smith and our former president, Jesse. There's always positions on the board if anybody wants to, join us in our merry little group or volunteer. We're always looking for volunteers for various positions. I would love to see an event coordinator get going at some point, but still looking to backfill that position. Move this over here a little bit. First up, our 10 million tree order. Some bad news on that front. Unfortunately, the county's request for 8,000 trees was reduced to about 1,200 to 2,000 due to lack of supplies from the partnership's suppliers. So the order that we originally had has been severely cut back. We won't know until we hear from the county how much they're getting to determine what we're getting. Susan is doing a good job of letting people know, keeping them updated on the status of those, but we really won't know what everybody gets until it all shakes out. So it's disappointing news. We're certainly sorry to hear it, but I did want to make everyone aware of it. Sorry.
Rick, your screen disappeared.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I apologize.
Hit the button.
I hit the button and I kind of wanted to see everybody's reactions. I hate speaking and not being able to see everybody. So let me. Am I back?
Not yet.
Did you remember to share your screen again?
Now it's coming.
Yeah.
Yep, now it started.
It's on.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that. Now let me move this window. Hopefully it won't disappear again over there. Okay. All right, again, sort of disappointing news. This is the last week to get orders into Susan for the North Creek order. Susan's looking to close out that order this week. So if you haven't, reached out to her looking for how to order through the North Creek pre-order, you can do so through the Wild Ones email address. Plants will be available on the list, availability before April 22nd. We're looking to pick them up the end of April. They will be delivered here. Payment will be due by March 31st. When I say here, I mean Plymouth Meeting, my house. Pricing will be determined once we get everybody's order, and we'll figure out the delivery, sales tax, and royalties. There will be a 10% charge for non-members. If anyone is a non-member and wishes to be part of our plant pre-order sale, please do so. The member survey, you may not have seen the member survey come across your email because I have not sent it out yet. I do want to get this out before we start having more in-person events. I'd like to get this out the end of the month. I think with Denise's help, I've figured out how to make it anonymous. So we can, you can be as frank or as candid as you'd like to be in your comments. These are the questions that we were sort of interested in knowing the answers for. We will share the responses as a whole, but not signal out anybody's individual response, as I won't even know who they come from. This legislative call to action is not a repeat. I did not forget to take this out. This still has not been taken up by the Senate yet. So if you're interested, House Bill 797, the Native Vegetation along Pennsylvania Highways Bill, requires PennDOT to use native plants in the roadwork alongside this throughout the state. It was taken up and passed by the House last year, but for some reason they retired the session before the Senate had a chance to vote on it. So we're urging legislatures to take it back up this session. You can go on to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, sign that petition at the link below, and Susan will probably even include that in the newsletter. Grant update. This was the big news for the week, for the month. We had previously received applications for 2 grants, one from Northley Middle School and one from Bondsville Mill Park. I'm happy and thrilled to say that the board has approved 2 $1,000 grants, one for each of those applications. So details below. Northley Middle School was using their school environmental club. They're creating a 30-foot by 40-foot pollinator and native garden. The grant that we provided them is to be used to cover the native plants and seeds. It's got great volunteers. It's got great advice. Heather Gray, who is a master gardener, will be advising that project. There's a picture of sassafras, which is one of their plants that they requested and is part of their native garden. The second grant is Bondsville Mill Park. Again, the board felt this was a great opportunity. It's, staff and volunteer supported. The process involves removal of invasives, and they have replant trials, the trail and welcome areas with natives. The grant that we provided them is to cover native plants and seeds. Again, it's volunteer supported. All of the money that we provided, the $1,000 that we provided to each one of these, is going to 100% native plants. It's not going to any administrative fees. It's not covering anybody's salary. Everything is volunteer. Both of these grants have committed to removal of the invasives through manual processes. No chemicals are going to be used to clear those spaces or prep those areas. So great educational, great outreach events. We hope to have updates from both of these grantees. And Bondsville will be looking for volunteers. So if anybody lives in that area and is looking to volunteer, please reach out to us. We'll put you in contact with folks at Bondsville. Any questions on the grants? Okay, I'm going to move right along then. April event. So this is our first in-person event for the year. I'm very excited. So Jenkins Arboretum in Berwyn opens up, I think, April 20th, which is also happens to be the weekend that Earth Day is. We're looking to meet up as a group around 11 a.m. in the parking lot. That's Saturday, April 20th. Meet up in the parking lot. If you look, there's some great natives that they advertise as being sort of out and about and available. The bluebells should be out. There should be some trilliums out. There should be some acura out. I can't wait. Don't know about you guys. Also that day, we're asking for some volunteers in Phoenixville. It's the Phoenixville Earth Day event. We've been asked to table. We haven't said yes or no yet, just because I think some of us were planning on being at the Arboretum and couldn't be there from 12 to 4 at the table. But if anybody from Phoenixville, I know we've got some Phoenixville members out there in the chapter. If anybody wants to volunteer, please reach out to us. We'd love to have you guys table and represent SEPA and native plants. Any volunteers in the group tonight?
Rick, do you need to be there for the whole 4 hours?
I don't know. I didn't table this event last year. It was up to Jess, and I think that it's pretty informal. I don't necessarily think that it is required to be there the 4 hours. It seems
Okay.
pretty loosey-goosey.
Maybe we can send that information out.
Okay,
Maybe. Who knows?
I can ask Susan to include it in the newsletter, maybe.
Be great.
Ask for volunteers.
Okay. Text box.
All right. Thought of the month. I struggled with this one a little bit, and I meant to mention that I did a lot of research in preparation for this month's talk. And I found out some pretty interesting things. The first half of the month, I was researching trees, and I start to think about trees past and present here in the Pennsylvania, and specifically our region. So I learned some interesting things that, throughout the state was essentially covered in diverse forest, 90 to 95% of the land pre-settlement, pre-Europeans, from the last ice age to about 1630, when European settlers started coming in. There was some forest management by the indigenous population. That management favored fire-resistant species, amongst them oaks, hickories, and pines. Along with the European settlers came the first sawmill in 1862. The Europeans began clearing land for farming, for white pine, for ships, hemlock for tanning, oaks, chestnuts, and for charcoal and commerce. The railroads came through in the late 1800s and began clear cuts and burning through the western part of the state. By 1907, we had our lowest percentage of forest cover in the state. We had about 32% coverage of forest. Everything else had been sort of clear cut. It represented about 9.2 million acres. The good news is that we've turned things around pretty well. Currently, we have about 59% forest coverage in the state. So we've gone from 9.2 million acres to 16.5 million acres in just over 100 years. We've added 7.3 million acres since 1907. Of the lands that are forested right now, 29% is public forest, 71% are privately owned forests. The 10 most common tree species in order of total by numbers in Pennsylvania state forests are as follows: the red maple, the black birch, black cherry, beech, cherry maple, hemlock, white ash, red oak, chestnut oak, black gum. Locally, in the southeast PA uplands, red oak, mixed hardwoods subtype, and red oak and chestnut, tulip trees, red maples, and hickories dominate the landscape, while in the floodplains, sycamores, silver maples, box elders, elms, black willows, black walnuts, green ash, and red maples are the lay of the land. Again, I think I wanted to kind of carry away the positive message that came along with that, and that was, even though we wouldn't think of people being environmentally conscious 100 years ago. The mood had switched such that they recognized the dangers of clear-cut forests, and there was a move to begin to restore local forests. I think that we're continuing that trend. I would like to see the emphasis on not only quality but quantity. I think our forests are currently endangered by, human pests, disease, acid rain. We've had blights. Right now, our impacted have been elms, chestnuts, hemlocks, oaks, beeches, dogwoods, sugar maples, ash. All have suffered or been impacted. I think we as a group are doing what we can. I think we just need to continue to get the message out. Anybody have any comments on thought of the month?
Rick, I thought that was really awesome. And a question that occurred to me was, what is the quality of this second growth forest? And is it being managed by the federal, state, and local municipal owners? I know probably a lot of the state forest is PA game lands. And my sense is that this area is managed for game as opposed to necessarily for natural resources, but I don't know that. I'm actually not involved in the game lands program. So maybe someone has more information on that, but that's just an interesting question that popped into my brain with all these fascinating facts and all the forest that has been, as you said, re-added since it was originally clear cut.
I think what I'm most nervous about is that 71%, that 12 million acres. That's
privately owned.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know that any of that's preserved for, conservation. I think it's probably just at the owner's discretion. And should it become economically viable in the future for them to get rid of those forests and replace it with McMansions, I think that the owners probably wouldn't think twice about it. So
I don't know. I think a lot of private forest owners do feel responsibility to the land and a connection with the land, but it also depends on the forest. I know I've read relatively recently that a large percent of ownership of Pennsylvania private forests is turning over to the next generation. And that's the point at which, as you said, could the next generation have a different perspective on the forest than their parents or grandparents, whichever it is? Could they be just as inclined to preserve it? Could they be looking at new ways to preserve it? Carbon credits is actually a really neat way to keep forest as forest. There are some programs out there that will pay over a 25-year period for property owners to keep their forest as forest, because then the companies that buy the credits can sell the credits, on the carbon market. So that'll encourage some owners perhaps to keep the forest intact, but there's always development pressure. We all know that. We live in Southeastern Pennsylvania. We see it every single day. It is a real danger, I'm sure.
How many acres are a forest? I mean, how do you determine what's a forest?
That's a good question. I think you can have a forest of just a few acres. It just depends on, I think forest refers to tree cover. Do you think, Rick, as opposed to grassland or shrubs? I think the forest is just a reference to tree cover.
Right.
Like when Ptolemy talks about the edges and the properties butting up against other properties, that kind of thing. But so we need to have a bigger space than just properties butting up to properties, right?
Correct.
Well, a lot of animals and birds require a larger area of intact forest for habitat because of the way they forage or raise their young or whatever. So yeah, smaller forested lands don't always work for all habitats, but they work for some.
And to your point, Marilyn, these edge areas are the ones that are probably the most degraded because they're sort of, they're impacted by the kudzus and the honeysuckles, and the invasives gain a foothold from the edge and work their way in.
Yes, they do.
But the critters like the edge too.
Just because there's no more forest for them to live in. Unfortunately, in our area, that's the case, I believe.
I think some animals do use edge habitat, but then there's equally a number of mammals and birds and insects that need large swaths of intact interior forest. So some of each.
Yeah, I've got 2 mangy resilient to mange, and that I shouldn't treat them unless they are affected by over 50% of their body. So fingers crossed. I've got a trail cam. I'm going to keep an eye on them and monitor their health status and step in if I need to.
How would you'd have somebody come and trap them?
Trap them, or you bait them with ivermectin.
Right, and put out cat food with ivermectin in it because they love. Again. We live basically in the woods, and we have 1.6 acres. So except for what our house, barn, and driveway are on, all the rest of it is trees, and the people behind us and behind them and next to us. So there's, several houses here of contiguous trees. I will say, I wouldn't necessarily say forest, but we're in a little woods, and we have possum. Porcupine. I haven't seen a raccoon much. I have to fix the batteries in my trail cam, but yeah. So I mean, we get a lot of things here, and we're across the street from us. There's a row of houses, and there's a development behind them. So it's only our side of the street.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. That was good. That was great.
I had
number one threat to regeneration in southeast Pennsylvania forest is our deer, overbrowse, and invasive plants. There's pretty much no regeneration in our area, and I was quite friendly with the director of Penn State Forestry, and he fears that's the same for the whole state.
I thank you for that, Don. That was a great input. And what's interesting is I spent a lot of time going up to the Poconos, and I see the only understory that's happening is the invasives that the deer don't touch, right? So it's bush honeysuckle and Japanese barberry and burning bush and that stuff that's just sort of spreading, taking over the understories without any regeneration of hardwoods. Everybody do your part.
Well, go hunt some deer is what you're saying. Okay.
Or get really high fences.
Oh, it's really hard.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I just had a deer wipe out one of my sweet bay magnolias over the weekend.
Ow. Oh, rats.
Yeah. They never showed any interest, so I stopped really kind of watching it. And then as soon as I turned my back, a buck came in and rubbed the entire trunk.
Ooh, ouch. Might be able to save it by wrapping the trunk.
And I'm gonna protect it. It'll be if I don't get it to it, I couldn't do it because I was too busy writing this presentation this week. But
Right.
as soon as this presentation's over, tomorrow, as soon as this rain stops,
I have lots of brambles, and I cut the brambles and put them around the trunks of these trees, and it seems to help.
Smart.
I mean, that's just one more way. Other than cages, I don't know what else to do.
I was using deer scram and the sort of the treatments to keep the deer away. And I think once it wears off, the deer are so angry at not being able to get to it, they go at it with a vengeance.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. As soon as I get heavy rain, then those deer go right after those trees.
Well, they don't like the brambles, so and I've used it a lot, and just anything prickly.
Okay.
And you got to cut it down anyway, right?
Right.
So
Right. Interesting.
use them.
Yeah.
Marilyn,
Good advice, Marilyn.
do you just put it around the base of the tree?
Well, it depends, like, with the junipers, I put it kind of higher up. I put it kind of nestle it into the branches. It just I mean, just any kind of thing you can think of so they will be unhappy if they take a bite.
Right.
And then, and you know, that's just what I've done recently, and it seems to help, at least for the babies, for the little ones.
This is the starving time, though. February and March, it's the hungriest time of year for those animals because
That's the thing.
none of their food is out yet. So
Yeah.
I think everything is. This is actually when I fence. Is anytime after Christmas is the
Okay.
time to fence or protect because that's when they're going crazy.
That's a good idea. Good idea.
Susan, I'm going to be doing a lot of talking this evening. So if you don't mind, will you talk about Tree of the Month?
Oh no, definitely. Let me just get it up here on the newsletter. Okay. Tree of the month for this year, we're focusing on oaks. So our oak this month is the white oak. A lot of you are probably familiar with white oak, so this might be old news. It's a very large, long-lived, stately tree. It has beautiful spreading horizontal branches. A lot of the oaks will have a dark red fall leaf color, but not all of them. And it's not just a variety thing. It can be individual to the tree. These trees, as I'm sure you all know, can get really tall, 50 to 100 feet, but their real presence is the width. If you look at those limbs, they just spread out horizontally, and they can also be 80 to 100 feet wide. So there's just a huge canopy created by this one tree. They do require full sun. They require deep, relatively moist, well-drained soil. They are not drought resistant until they're mature, until they've gotten settled in the site for a couple years. So don't shirk on the water if you plant one. Once they're established, they're much more tolerant of drought. They also do not tolerate wet soil or poor drainage. So if you have clay soil, this is probably not the ideal oak for you. Habitat value, like all oaks, an amazing number of Lepidoptera are supported, as well as the bark as it gets older and forms the larger crevices. Lots of little insects will either hide or live in there, and that's just perfect habitat for your woodpeckers, your creepers, your other nuthatches, your little tree eaters. And then the acorns are eaten by snakes. I would love to see that. Obviously raccoons and of course deer. White oak is a mast tree. So the deer will be under there if you have white oaks. So a really great tree, even for a small yard. And we talked before, I think last time, about trimming oaks smaller if you need a small tree and not letting it get to 80 or 100 feet, but trimming them when they start to get above 5 feet or 10 feet, wherever you feel comfortable and you're able to trim the tree. You still have a white oak. It'll still branch out. It won't obviously be 100 feet wide, but it'll still provide some habitat with those leaves. I don't know how, I've never seen an old oak tree that was really small and coppiced like that. So I would think it might still create the heavy ridged bark that would be good insect habitat, but I don't know. Something to look for if you're ever in England where they do a lot more coppicing than we do here. So that's our white oak.
So just to quickly add, it is sort of the king crown jewel of Keystone species, specifically the white oak. I know that I've seen that 450 caterpillar species number thrown around, but I've also seen recent talks by Doug Ptolemy that he's, that number is now over 500 in everything that he references in terms of oaks and white oaks. That the
Wow.
number of caterpillars supported by oaks, somewhere over 500 at this point.
And that's really interesting to me because when I was growing up, we had pin oaks on my property, and my parents regarded the insects that lived in the pin oaks as pests. And maybe they were non-natives, I don't know, but it wasn't regarded as a good habitat tree. It was, oh my gosh, can't sit under the oak tree because caterpillars will drop on you. So we've certainly changed our perspective since then.
Thank you, Susan. That was great. I'm going to keep you on board if you want to go and talk about this month's invasive species.
Yeah, what a problem this stuff is. I would guess that a majority of people who are out there gardening have this or have seen this. because it's just so invasive. And unfortunately, the deer and other critters spread it on their feet, on their hooves, possibly on their fur, but I think it's more a feet and hooves thing. The seeds move with water. This is just a nasty little thing. I don't have a picture up here, but there is one in the newsletter of an entire view of a riparian forest. The floor is just covered with these leaves and these flowers. Yes, it's pretty carpet, but if you understand what it's doing, it's not such a great sight, because these plants, if you dig them up, you'll see they have quite a tough root system. It's deeper than you think it is. And so it covers the ground, both underground and on the surface, and prevents our little spring ephemerals from coming up, prevents them from seeding and growing. And it actually inhibits the germination of a lot of the natives that you might have otherwise, white wood aster, blue wood aster starting to pop up. But with this stuff covering the ground, it really inhibits that growth. So this is a big problem all around, a non-native that spreads all too quickly. The way you identify it, you can see the green leaves are very shiny. They're about the size of a quarter or a little smaller. They have smooth edges. If you ever see, in fact, if you have pachyra, be careful not to pull up your pachyra, because they'll look the same if you're just cruising the ground with your eyes and looking for the dark green leaves to pull up. You'll notice your Pachyra aurea has toothed leaf margins, and this stuff is smooth. And that's before the flowers are out. Once the flowers are out, I think it cannot be controlled except by a foliar spray. Before the flowers come out, you can, if you want to be diligent, try to dig the stuff. And I've got some more detailed tips in the newsletter about how to do that, because you don't want to leave anything in the ground, because it will sprout from the roots, it'll sprout from the tubers, and it'll sprout from little tiny, they call them bulbils. They're the size of the head of a large pin that you'll find growing at the base of the leaf stems. All of those things will propagate this darn stuff. The only thing it doesn't propagate from is literally the leaves by themselves. And of course it seeds. Once it flowers, it reseeds. So it's a really strong, it's a really strong competitor. If you're going to dig it, try to dig all of it. But you know what? If you don't get quite all of it, come back next year. This is a multi-year proposition, unfortunately. That's for small infestations. The other thing you can do for small infestations is smother. If you recognize that you're smothering everything there, if you have spring ephemerals in the same spot, if you have later sprouting perennials in the same spot, you don't want to smother, because you smother them all. But it is effective if you have nothing but a carpet of lesser celandine. The other thing that's effective that I'm trying this year is a foliar spray, and I'm not talking about glyphosate, I'm not talking about anything systemic. I'm talking about the foliar sprays that are approved for organic use. If you look under that qualification, you'll find things like scythe, burnout. There's one that's made of the fatty acids of citrus fruits. There's one that's made of D-limonene. There's one that's made of cinnamon oil. So these are substances that dry out the cuticle that protects the leaves and literally kill the leaves. And once the leaves are dead, they can no longer photosynthesize. And in theory, the plant then dies for lack of nutrients. So it's not a systemic. It does not go into the root. It doesn't kill the plant by that means. And therefore, none of this stuff goes into the soil. You still want to be careful if you have spring ephemerals, not to spray the leaves of your ephemerals. But if you spray the leaves of this stuff, as I said, I'm trying it out. It could be a way to control other infestations that you're not willing or able to dig. So this is a tough one to get rid of. It's better to prevent it, but how do you prevent it? Well, one way, the theory that's being tried is called guerrilla gardening. It's advocated by the humane gardener, and Marilyn, you're going to remember her name and I don't. Nancy, it's her last name. Anyway, if you Google the humane gardener, you'll find her blogs, which are quite interesting. But her point with this plant and with garlic mustard is that you introduce native competitors that will actually outcompete this very aggressive plant, because they are also aggressive. And the first one that comes to mind is Pachyra aurea, which, as you know, is a fantastic, aggressive, not just a ground cover, but it does cover the ground. Its roots are tenacious, mat-like. They delve into the ground. They're not shallow. And they could, in theory, outcompete this stuff the way they outcompete garlic mustard. So the humane gardener advocates planting Pachyra aurea and maybe some other highly competitive natives in with this lesser celandine if you have it, and then possibly pulling the leaves of the lesser celandine or killing them with the foliar spray so that they are less competitive and the Packera will take over. It's a theory. It's one way to address this stuff. Definitely don't mow or weed whack this stuff. Anything that spreads the little bulbils and the roots around is just going to spread it more. So it's a tough one. It's not pleasant to have it all. There are some things we can do. We're trying our best. That's all we can do.
It
Anybody
is
who
a bear.
Okay.
My
you have
neighbor,
some?
my neighbor's yard is covered, and
Yeah,
I think the deer, I think it's getting caught in the between the deer hooves
they do spread it.
through my
Oh,
underneath my trees.
and it loves lawns. It'll grow under trees. About the only place it doesn't grow is in dry shade or hot sun. But lawns right now are pretty moist. It doesn't care about drought in the summer. It's gone by summer. Spring is so wet that it's just all over the lawns and the woods. Yeah, it's everywhere.
I go up and down the Blue Route every day, 476, and
Oh, do they have it?
towards
It's
Delaware
spreading in
County.
my meadow and it's not very wet up there.
Uh-huh.
It's
Um,
really nasty, nasty stuff.
It is. Nancy Lawson, thank
Nancy
you.
Lawson is the name of the lady who wrote Humane Gardener. And
Thank
she's
you,
written
Marilyn.
A bunch of
Yep.
books.
She has some good suggestions.
She really does.
And you put the link in the chat. Thank you.
So I have had some fairly good success with manually removing this material. But what I end up doing is just grabbing the whole bunch, throwing it all in the trash can. I don't even try to sort through the soil and recover soil. As those little bubblets are so tiny that you're gonna miss some and it's just gonna come back.
No, you're right. And that's another problem with this stuff. If you dig it, you will lose so much soil and you have to be willing to lose the soil. Because if you don't, as you said, Rick, you're going to leave some bulbils. They're just going to come back next year. So you're digging out a whole handful of soil and you're trashing the whole thing because you can't even compost it because this stuff will propagate in the compost.
And the seeds travel with water. So if you're trying to do a large area, start uphill, so that you're just not recontaminating, the seeds wash down the hill. Don't start at the bottom of the hill. You'll just be frustrated.
Yeah, good point.
Fantastic.
It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. Anybody have any words of wisdom for this month's invasive species?
I have a plan.
Okay.
So this year I have a very small infestation on a first order stream, and I'm just below the headwaters and it's just starting up. So we check for it every day, every week. And I'm gonna try taking scissors and cutting the stems off below the surface of the soil and, taking the leaves away and see if I can starve the little bulbets that way. So I believe from last year, my infestation, I think, was small enough. It's worth a try. If you had billions of plants, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, that's similar to killing it by drying out the leaves. You're right. If you can starve the roots, then in theory, you can really get rid of it. I hope it works.
Fingers crossed. I'll report back.
Yeah,
I
good
was gonna
luck.
say, I look for updates on both Susan, your use of the non-systemic poisons, and Donna, your use of scissors.
Just don't run with them.
Yeah, I will mention, for those people that are okay with systemic poisons, I don't judge. There is a very narrow window with which you can use systemic poisons on these particular plants, and it is just before now is the time before they go to flower. And I won't say anything more about poisons, but I just wanted to put that out there for those that are okay using them.
Now, why doesn't mowing work as long as you don't disturb the soil when you're mowing?
It doesn't kill anything. You can't mow low enough because these are literally ground huggers. If your mower gets to the surface of the soil like a weed whacker, you're then spreading those tiny bulbils the size of a large pinhead. You're flying them into the air. That's why. Unfortunately,
it seems like that would at least keep it from flowering, but I guess you can't get that low.
it actually doesn't. The mower doesn't, and the weed whacker will spread them.
It is easily confused with our native marigolds, marsh marigolds.
Can be. The
Can
habit is
be.
different.
Correct. And chances are, if you see, marsh marigolds aren't that prolific. So if you see a field full of green and gold like this, like shown in the picture,
Right.
chances
It's
are
not.
it's probably
It's not. Nobody should be that,
Permanent.
nobody can be that lucky. It would be lovely if we were.
I thought marsh marigold leaves were a little bit bigger.
They are, they're not glossy, and it doesn't, marsh marigold doesn't grow in mats like this. It's one clump.
This is a huge clump.
This is just a mat. Marsh
Right.
marigold has one root system that the leaves all spring from. This guy, if you look at it, there is one clump, but there's usually more than one. This also has really bright white stems at the base, and marsh marigold does not.
And I believe marsh marigolds only have 5 or 6 petals on the flowers. Whereas,
I've read that counting the petals doesn't always work, and I don't know because I don't have marsh marigold.
I'm looking at
could
a
work.
picture of marsh marigold on Google and it does show me 6 petals. So did the lesser celandine have 7?
They're supposed to have 8 to 10, but I defy you to, to
I
count the
see
petals
7,
on a
looking
whole.
at those pictures.
we're all sitting here.
They all look like they have 7.
I think it's more the growth habit. If you're reduced to counting petals, I would encourage you to look at the growth habit instead.
Okay. All right. On that note, who wants to talk about Keystone plants?
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is an amazing presentation that you put together.
All right. So I've spent quite a bit of time this month working on this presentation. This presentation is designed to be a dialogue, not a lecture. So much like everything else I do, your input is welcome and encouraged. Please participate via the chat window or raise your hand either literally or virtually to add to the conversation. Again, I ask help from the board members or anyone else to just kind of let me know if somebody has their hands up or if there is something in the chat window that I should address. So what is a keystone plant? A keystone plant is a genera that are unique to local food webs within ecoregions. The concept of keystone species came to light by ecologist Robert Payne in the 1960s. Robert Payne was an ecologist who worked specifically in tidal pools in Washington state. And he noticed that within the tidal pools, if he removed the starfish, certain species of mussels would overtake the tidal pools and eliminate all the species below it. So essentially the ecosystem would collapse with the removal of the starfish. So he likened that to the removal of a keystone in an archway. See, the keystone is a removal of that keystone will cause the entire archway to collapse. So that is where the concept of keystone species or keystone plants comes across. I went looking for it, and it's something that I think I first learned about from Doug Ptolemy, right? Probably where most of us learned about it at first. And I was looking specifically for keystone plants for our region. It wasn't as straightforward as I had thought it would be. So I did find this document that says Keystone Plant List from the National Wildlife Foundation for ecoregion number 8. So don't struggle to try and read that. I know it's a low quality image. You're not going to be able to read it no matter how hard you try. That data is recreated in this presentation, so you don't have to try and struggle to read it. There's quite a bit of data here. So I'm not going to go through all of it line by line. As a matter of fact, we are going to eliminate that part of the list. I'm just not going to break up these two regions, these two lists. We're going to focus in on, this list, which is about 20 genres, 8 tree genuses, 2 shrub genuses, and 10 perennial flower genera. So I mentioned ecoregion, right? You see ecoregion 8. What is an ecoregion? So an ecoregion is an area where ecosystems, the type, quality, quantity of the environmental resources are generally similar. It was created by the federal agencies in the 1980s. And it was used to implement ecosystem management strategies across federal agencies, state agencies, and non-governmental or governmental organizations that are responsible for different types of resources within the same geographic area. You can see ecoregion 8 is a pretty broad ecoregion. So that is the level 1 ecoregion. Obviously, Maryland is like, well, is it going to be the same keystone species from Maine to Florida? And if you just go by the ecoregions, yes, it would be just the same species from Maine to Florida. Certainly, I didn't want to do anything or cover anything that broad, so we started narrowing it down a little bit. So this is level 1 ecoregion. There are 25 ecoregions in level 2. So if you look, here's a close-up of sort of the ecoregions. We are ecoregion 2 level 3.1, 3.3, 3.4, and 3.5. Most of the 5-county region of Philadelphia sits in the 8.3 region, which is the USA Plains. These regions are further broken down to level 3 ecoregions. If you're interested, we in Philadelphia are 8.3.1, which is the Southeastern USA Plains, Northern Piedmont. Well, that's an awful lot of information that isn't really helpful. There are no lists that I could find of keystone species that are specific to level 3 ecoregion 8.3.1. So as a result, I had to do quite a little bit of groundwork to figure out what keystone species are native to our region. The first thing I did was the Lady Bird Johnson wildflower site. If you're familiar with that, I see Anna shaking her head and a bunch of other people that use that as a resource. It is a great preliminary resource. You will see a lot of links to that site. Most of the pictures that aren't credited were stolen from that site or borrowed from that site for this presentation. It is not always 100% correct. I do actually go to the Biota of North America program website, which is not as pretty and not as friendly to use, but is probably one of the most useful resources for anybody interested in native plants or invasive plants or trying to figure out which is which. So what I essentially did for methodology in terms of this presentation was I went to the wildflower.org site. I typed in the genus that I wanted to research. I narrowed it down to Pennsylvania. Then I went into the Biota of North America program site, where I confirmed that that species that was generated by the Lady Bird Johnson wildflower actually is native to our area. And then I put it on a list. Show of hands, anybody that has their camera on. Everybody familiar with these 2 sites? I know Anna shook her head yes. Denise, you and I talked about Biota North America. That's a Donna. Good. All right. Great sites. I highly recommend both of them. Again, you'll see a lot of information in this presentation, and I cite both of them and credit both of them. So I mentioned, it's broken up into 3 categories. The first category is trees of Pennsylvania. These are just the genus level list. So we can go through. I mentioned the trees are Lepidoptera hosts. So the king of kings is the white oak and the Quercus species, or the Quercus genus. Other genuses in the list include Prunus, Patella, Populus, Acer, Malus, Caria, and Pinus. And we're going to go through each one of those. And I have a list. Again, this list will probably be included in a future newsletter or somewhere else we'll make available. I will probably make these slides available in PDF form and ask someone in the group to upload them to the files of the Facebook site. So if you're members of the Facebook site, these lists will end up in one form or another in the Facebook files site. Again, you don't have to copy them. You don't have to commit them to memory. They will be available in the future. Quercus oaks. This is the big one, right? So this is the king of kings of Keystone species. Commonly known as oaks, all oaks belong to the beech family, and they're evenly distributed across the northern hemisphere with reaching some high altitudes in the tropics. The leaves are alternate, simple, and lobed with toothed or entire margins. They can be deciduous, shedding their leaves in fall, or evergreen, retaining their leaves year-round. They are moaceous, meaning they have both male and female flowers. Male flowers are borne in catkins, while female flowers are solitary or clustered. The fruits are acorns, which are nuts encased in a capsule, a scaly cap. They mature in 1 to 2 seasons and are the food source for many animals. The habitat is mostly large trees, but some species are shrubs. The woods are hard and durable, used for construction, furniture, and other purposes. The Quercus gene is further divided into various groups based upon leaf characteristics and other factors. These majestic trees play a significant role in the environment, providing for habitat for wildlife and contributing to the overall health of the ecosystems. So I'm not going to cover oaks in detail as we are doing Tree of the Month this year, and it's focused on oaks. So I don't necessarily feel the need to dive into oaks particularly. There is a picture of some nice white oak leaves here in this presentation. I will mention, the two big subgroups are the white oaks and the red oaks. White oaks prefer sunny locations. They can do dry or moist. Quercus rubra, the red oaks, prefer sunny locations, but they often like to be drier. You can see the red oaks have pointed tips, while the white oaks have rounded lobes. Locally, the dry ridges and rocky mountaintops are typical of the ridge and valley of the Poconos. They are home to the chestnut scarlet oaks, while our smaller scrubby species like scrubs and bare oaks tend to be in the valleys. These trees also absorb high amounts of CO2, so they are carbon sinks for carbon capture. This is a great tree. So prunus, plums and cherries. Plums and cherries, they belong to the rose family. It's a diverse group of over 400 species of flowering trees and shrubs, native to temperate regions of the northern hemisphere. Key features include deciduous or evergreen trees. Some shrubs have thorns. Leaves are simple, alternate, with toothed margins and often glands at the base. Flowers are typically white to pink with 5 petals and sepules, borne singularly or in clusters. Fruit are stone fruits with a fleshy mesocarp and a hard pit endocarp enclosing the seeds. Examples include plums, cherries, peaches, apricots, and almonds. There are some great species here. I don't know that I've ever had a pin cherry, Prunus pennsylvanica, pop up on my property, but I sure wish I did. Look at those cherries. Prunus pennsylvanica is a fire or pin cherry. They grow to about 35 to 50 feet tall. The bright red branches and fruit, they have reddish to orange yellow mature bark. They thrive in sunny, rocky, sandy soil, and they're called fire cherry because it's the seedlings that come up first after forest fires. There's some other great prunus species on this list. I myself would like to get myself an American plum this year. And I grew up next to the Susquehanna River, so I did see that this is one of those differences between the two sites that I used. So the Lady Bird Johnson actually lists this Prunus susquehanna as a separate species. The Bonap site does not list it, and I think that they might just consider it a variation of the pin cherry, or the regular sand cherry, the Prunus pumila. Any comments, questions on prunus, cherries, plums?
There's a Prunus Mauritania. Does anybody know anything about that? It's oh, there you have it, beach plum. Has anyone used, has anyone been? Once again, I'm looking for small, and I think that's more the small direction. And I'm also looking for bird food.
I
So
know
if
that
anybody has any input on that, I'd appreciate it.
while native, the beach plums like sandy soils. So I don't know how your soils are, Maryland, but I know that they do prefer sandy type soils.
Rick, there's a question in the chat about oaks, asking about the oaks, whether the acorns take 1 or 2 seasons to mature. So that depends on whether you're talking about a red oak or a white oak. Red oak acorns take 2 years to mature. White oak acorns, trees in the white oak family, take 1 year to mature. Red oak species include northern red, black, scarlet, and pin oak. Common white oak species around us include the white, the chestnut, and the swamp white oak. So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
That was very helpful. All right, moving on. Betula, birches. This was one of the first trees that I planted when I moved into this property 3 years ago. I went to Edge of the Woods and I bought myself a river birch. This is not my property. Mine does not look that nice yet. I hope it will someday. Birches, commonly known as birches, they're deciduous trees found primarily in the Northern Hemisphere. There's about 60 species of birches worldwide. The bark is one of the most distinguishing features of their birches. It is typically thin, papery, and often peels horizontally in characteristic flakes, exposing a lighter color inner bark. The leaves are simple, alternate, and have serrated margins. They typically egg-shaped or triangular and turn yellow in autumn before falling. Birches have male and female flowers on the same tree. Males are born with long, drooping catechins that appear before the leaves emerge. Female flowers are smaller and born in upright clusters that develop into winged nutlets. The fruit of birch is a small winged nutlet called a samara. These samaras are dispersed by wind and help the birches spread to new areas. Great birches, good plant. Anybody have any comments on birches?
I think the bark is interesting. And when we talked about doing this Keystone plant presentation, my question is, why are these particular species so much more important to so many insect species than other native species that we have? And I'm wondering now if part of it is the characteristics of, say, the bark. So the peeling bark of paper birch and river birch and all of the birches might allow so many different crevices for insects to hide, to overwinter, to pupate, whereas the smooth bark of, say, a cherry, although it's also a keystone species, doesn't give nearly as much real estate option for an insect. And I'm just wondering if that's one of the characteristics that makes birches a particular keystone species for so many insects. I'd love to know. I'd love for somebody with some scientific background to weigh on that, but that's just a thought that I had. Rick, when you mentioned about the bark characteristics, I just wondered if that's what makes birch so useful for insects.
I don't know. I like I said, I love it. I think that's a good question to ask, Susan. And I think that you're probably on the right track. I think that those cracks and crevices in those bark provide habitat for a lot of species. I will mention something that I didn't mention. I don't know if you took notice, but up here, sort of in the back. Is it pointer? In the upper right-hand side, I did actually include the number of species that use these plants as host plants. So that 284 is the number of caterpillar species that use the plant as a host. And the bee symbol is actually specialized bees that use the plant.
And that's good information, yeah.
So that's on top of all the slides. I forgot, sorry for not mentioning it. Andy has a question.
Oh, I was just going to comment. I have a very mature river birch. I'm really lucky to have that. And I will testify that there are a lot of birds that are pecking at those cracks and crevices, woodpeckers, but also like titmice and all those birds. And I think it's also a host plant for a lot of caterpillars.
284.
Yep.
That's
thank
pretty
you.
awesome.
I also, it's one of the trees I think that is sort of safe from my deer population in the fact that it suckers pretty well. So it's sort of pointy, you know, the suckers pop up from the base and the deer can't get close enough to the bark of the tree to rub.
That is a good way to protect from deer, and that cherries will do that too. And I
Right.
used to look at my cherry trees and say, oh guys, that's messy. And I would cut off all those little sprouts coming up from the roots and the base of the tree. And now I leave them because I'm thinking that it might be some protection against varmints getting close enough to rub the bark off the trunk, as you said, with your sweet bay.
I did see a question in the chat. I had understood that my white oak and swamp white oak would normally not produce acorns until they were 20 years old.
This is true. The 1 and 2 year acorn cycle simply refers to if you have a mature red oak, the acorns will take 2 years to mature. If you have a mature white oak, you can expect acorns every year. That's all that 1 and 2 year means. It's your tree still has to be mature before it produces acorns.
They're on the tree for that long, Susan?
Apparently red oaks, and you know what, I have red oaks, but they're all so high up I can't see.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you will get a crop every 2 years. It means that whichever acorns mature in year one, start off in year one, will mature in year two, but more acorns will start in year two and they'll mature in year three. So it's an ongoing cycle. It's just that to get any acorn to mature, it will take 2 seasons in a red oak. In a white oak, every year the flowers make acorns, the acorns mature and fall. I think that's what that means. We really need a plant botanist on this in this group. We really need a plant biologist. I will put it in the newsletter. Call us all plant biologists.
Calling volunteer plant biologists.
Really, because I'm just going on what I learned on the internet. I don't know. You know, we need somebody with some more training.
Sean had a good comment and he said, I think this is in response to the river birch or the birches in general about the catechins. And he said, winter birds gobble the seeds of the catechins, free, clean bird feeder, always an advantage. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, and those catkins can be really long and contain a bunch of seed that are easily accessible. So that's another good reason for birches to be a keystone species. Plus, they're so pretty.
All right, in a similar but not the same, populus. Populus includes the aspens, the cottonwoods, and the poplars. So the populus genus commonly known as poplars are tall, fast-growing trees native to temperate regions of the northern hemisphere. They can reach heights of 15 to 50 meters, 149 to 164 feet, with trunks up to 8 feet in diameter. Their key features are bark of young poplars have smooth bark that can be white, greenish, or dark gray. As they mature, the bark becomes rough and fissured in some species, while remaining smooth in others. Poplars are deciduous trees, meaning they lose their leaves in the fall. Their leaves are typically triangular or heart-shaped with toothed edges and turn bright or yellow gold before falling. Poplars produce small, inconspicuous flowers and dripping catkins before leaves emerge in the early spring. These flowers are wind-pollinated. Poplar seeds are tiny, surrounded by tiny cottony hairs, allowing them to be easily dispersed by wind. Poplars are a valuable source for wood, for lumber, pulp, and biofuels. Poplars that are native to our area include the balsam poplar, the eastern cottonwood, the big-tooth aspen, swamp cottonwoods, and quaking aspens. They have both male and female flowers on each tree. They are often, be able to be told apart. So this is actually the eastern cottonwood is what I have here. So you can see the male catkin and the female catkin have a color difference. They look vastly different. You can also see that deep fissured bark, which, as we suspect, might be home to a number of species and provide habitat for insects. They are also the larval host to the viceroy butterfly. Any comments on poplars? Okay, moving on to the maples. Yeah, I thought I had a narrative for maples, but I don't see it. So we'll just talk about maples. So this is one of my favorite native maples. It is the striped maple. also known as moosewood. The striped maple is a deciduous understory tree with a graceful, arching, uneven crown, short trunk. The bark is smooth and green with longitudinal white stripes and trunks and branches. Old trunks lose the pronounced striping. Fall foliage is lemon yellow. Unlike other native maples, the green flowers of this species are terminal and pendulous. Striped maple is easily recognized even in winter by the striped twigs and bark, which make it a popular ornamental. Rabbits, beavers, deer, and moose eat the bark, especially in winter. It gets up to about 35 feet tall and prefers shady, moist habitat. There's also some other great maples on there. Most maples people are familiar with, you know, the sugar maples, the silver maples, the red maples, and the box elders. I don't have a whole lot of experience with black maples. Anybody have maples on their property? Anna, Marilyn?
Yeah, but they're Norways. Does that count?
No.
No. Nope, they're firewood.
Norways are invasive.
I know. I cut one down every year or two.
They're awful.
Makes a huge amount of firewood, and then I have
Yeah, they're
fewer
big.
seeds. I do have box elder. That's the maple that I have that sprouts. It's a multi-trunk in a lot of occurrences. The wood seems kind of brittle, but every time it breaks off, it just sends up new sprouts. It's very tough. It's a very tough, it's a survivor tree.
It's also a good food source for a lot of critters.
Yeah, I appreciate it for that reason. I'm glad I have a lot of sprouts. I must have a parent somewhere making seeds.
The box elders just kind of appear out of nowhere. I don't know where there is a box elder tree anywhere in my neighborhood, but I do get some that pop up just kind of out of nowhere.
They do, don't they? Maybe the box elder bug carries the seeds. I don't know.
I've got plenty of that.
Those are annoying little things, aren't they?
So, all right, moving on to Malice, the apples. This is a pretty short species list in terms of native apple species. The genus itself is fairly large. However, most of the apples are European or Asian in nature, mostly Asian. There's only really 4 native Malice species that are native to North America. And really only 2 that are native to our area. They are the Malus angstifolia and the Malus cornaria. Carnaria, okay. So the American crabapple, sweet crabapple, southern crabapple, the crab-apples. So while a very small genus in terms of native species available to us, it's very important. You can see it hosts 237 species, host species for caterpillars. I don't have any crab apples. Does anybody have crab apples?
I think I have one native crab. One of my landscapers identified it.
We have a crab apple. I'm not entirely sure if it's native or not, but the pollinators love it. And the birds don't, and nobody eats the crab apples until after they've been frozen a couple of times. And then it'll get swarmed by robins or whatever else happens to be floating around.
Apparently the native crab apples can propagate with the other ones very easily, and it's hard to tell them apart. But the ones with the smaller fruits are they're just covered with cedar waxwings and robins all the time.
Oh,
And,
that's so cool.
and they
the cedars.
also spread very easily. And we've been trying to determine whether they're the native ones or not, and we can't tell.
I think you're right that they hybridize with each other.
So I'm
cross with
hoping
each
to get
other.
some from 10,000 trees, but I don't know if they'll show up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But it would be fun because the birds love them and the bees. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're cool.
When I
Beautiful
was
flowers.
researching this, these 2 species do hybridize pretty readily.
Yeah, they do, definitely.
Hickories, pecans, pignuts, and butternuts. Also, not a huge representation in terms of native species for our area, but all very valuable. Again, I see a theme here with these trunks, Susan, and that they all provide habitat and they all provide lots of cracks and crevices. So
do
the
that.
hickories, especially the shagbark hickory especially would provide a ton of spaces for critters to hide.
Yeah, you can even have snakes hide up in, copperheads will hide up in the cracks of the hickories. I
Ooh.
look around when I'm walking. That's what we have mostly is hickories and oaks. And we have shagbarks all over the place. And I sort of keep an eye on it when I'm out there, but not really, because I don't expect to have a copperhead in my yard.
I would hope not. I think
Well,
they
I
like
mean-
bigger woods.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
You're kind of freaking me out, Judy.
I haven't seen a copperhead since I was a kid.
Yeah.
There were a lot more forests then. And
I've never
that's what
seen-
they like.
My
Yeah.
preference to not see one unless it's, somebody
I
else.
normally go barreling up to them. Now that you're telling me that copperheads live in the bark, I'm gonna just avoid them like the plague.
I never knew they did that. Plus, I bet the bark is warm.
I think they would just kind of, they like crawl up into, they're not up high, so they'd be down at the bottom.
Yeah, I
I
don't think
think
they're
just kind of
climbers.
go in there and take a nap so they don't have to lie on the ground where they're visible. And apparently they are very well camouflaged there.
Beth mentioned that
Interesting.
bats will often use shagbark hickories and that they are host to the hickory horned devil caterpillar.
Yeah, they're about 5 inches long, 4 or 5 inches long, and I desperately want to see one. It makes a beautiful moth. I forget what it is. But yeah, I really want to see one. I've seen pictures and they're almost as long as my hand.
Really?
They're awesome looking, and they're not prickly, pokey, fuzzy caterpillars. They're smooth green caterpillars, so you can actually touch them. They don't harm you to touch them. Don't touch prickly caterpillars. They're not good for you.
As a rule, yes.
Yeah, as a rule, some of the prickly caterpillars make you extremely sick.
Okay. I will take your word for that. I try not to touch anything I'm not aware of. The last tree in this section is the pine trees. Genus Pinus. The pine trees are, woody plants, keep their needle-like layer leaves all year round. Their leaves are long and slender. Needles, they're grouped together in bundles called fascicles. The woody cones, pines reproduce using cones, which are scales that hold their seeds. They're widespread in the northern hemisphere. Most pine species are found in the northern hemisphere, although some can be found in tropical and southern regions. They're important economical resources. They're valuable for timber, pulpwood, and resin. There are many different species of pines, each with an adaptation to its specific environment. The following species are native to Pennsylvania: the gray jack scrub pines, the shortleaf pine, the Table Mountain pine, the Norway Canadian pine, the pitch pine, the eastern white pine, the Virginia Jersey scrub pine. I am in the process now of looking for pitch pine. I'd like to get a pitch pine on my properties. I've got 4 or 5 eastern white pines on my 9/10 of an acre. And they're big and they drop big branches all the time. Luckily, they're not anywhere near structures.
I think I got a pitch pine at Redbud several years ago.
I saw one up at Edge of the Woods last time I was up. They had some as well. It was actually recommended for my property by the woman that runs Redbud. I had her do a survey of my property and make recommendations for native plants, and the pitch pine was one of those trees recommended for. I'm trying to establish a hedgerow along the roadway to sort of shield my property from the road.
Isn't that going to be kind of big for a hedgerow?
I think, well, the idea is that I will have, species, not necessarily, that would be sort of anchor species for those plants.
It's going to get really wide though. And since you're on a public road, the the township or the utility is going to come along and whack those branches off so that they don't overhang the road, or if you have lines, utility lines above ground, they're going to come and whack those branches off.
You're not wrong, Susan.
Yeah, I'm thinking that that's a better tree for the interior of a property.
Would you think of anything like a scrub pine would be a smaller, more appropriate?
I wouldn't put a pine, I just drive around here and my municipality is it's relatively wooded and open, and people who buy the bigger residential properties are starting to plant, some, as you said, screening trees next to the
Right.
road, and they will plant firs and pines within 10 feet of the edge of the road. And that that's a recipe for disaster, because if you look at a mature pine, the spread, it's not like an oak, but it's got to be 30 feet, anywhere from 30 to 50-foot spread. And so unless you want that tree to be whacked into some, unnatural looking form, plant it further back from the road and put
And
your,
salt tolerance too.
well, you know what? I don't think pines like salt. That's a really good
I
point,
know
Marilyn.
that's another issue that you have.
Exactly. And they like sandy soil, which you're going to find more compacted soil closer to roads. But it strikes me that hedgerow plants are much like something like gray dogwood, Cornus race, the smaller, the 10 to 15 foot trees that are maybe multi-stem so that you get a lot of density from the ground up, and that don't go crazy horizontal with their branches might be a better choice for what you're doing is planting a hedgerow between you and the road. That might be a better choice than a pine.
Yeah.
That's just a thought.
I'm trying to avoid, the arborvitae trap where everybody just.
Oh yeah, don't do that, because plus the deer eat it.
Right.
No, if you have a mixed shrub border of, say, red dogwood, witch hazel, winterberry holly, buttonbush, if you've got enough wet, you have red twigs, your red osiers.
I do have red twigs.
Yeah, plants like that top out at 10 to 15 feet.
I put a hop hornbeam in last year, which was nice because it doesn't lose its leaves until spring. So even though the leaves are dead, it still is fully leaved out.
I didn't know
And the
that.
deer don't like it that much.
They do not. They have not touched it, and I haven't had to put anything on it.
Susan, did you hear that?
I did. I got one, but it didn't survive.
Of course.
I know. Wherever I put it, it wasn't happy. And it was the most gorgeous soil I owned too. I was really offended when it didn't grow. I could try it again, you're right, but I haven't had luck so far.
So someone pointed out a typo in my my butternut versus bitternut. I will make that correction. Thank you for pointing that out. We'll fix that before the list goes out. Sean added that Edge of the Woods has pitch pines. He also recommended that Eastern Red Cedar is better near power lines, or a Little Gem Magnolia. Pines and notoriously Eastern white pines drop limbs in the snow and ice, and that is the case. I have a front yard full of pine limbs right now.
Right, that's never good.
Could I chime in? I've had
Absolutely,
my
Donna.
hand up.
Sorry, Don, I didn't see it.
If you would like to see, I've used white pine in all my hedgerows, and I plant 10 to 20 a year. And here at the Backyard Nature Preserve, you guys did a tour here last year. So before you plant, if you'd like to see what it looks like along the road, you can come here and see it. So
Okay.
the pines I planted along the road are about 23 years old, and they seem to get along really well with the power lines. And I constantly talk to the road crew, talk to Pico. If I think any branches look suspect, I trim them so that no one will trim them who's not supposed to. But they're much easier than the deciduous trees. So you're welcome to come and see them.
Thank you, Donna. I will take you up on that. All right. The shrub section is fairly small, and I'm not even sure that I completely agree with the designation that Salix is a shrub. I think that I often just think of like weeping willows, which are invasive, being such large trees that I never think of them as shrubs. And the Vasidium species are the blueberries. Again, huge hosts for caterpillars. Also, bees are very interested in both of these genus. First up, the Vasidium. This encompasses about 450 species of shrubs, both evergreen and deciduous, known for their delicious berries. These plants thrive in various regions worldwide, including North and South America, Asia, and Europe. They typically inhabit acidic, moist environments like forests, woodlands, and peat bogs. They are characterized by small bell-shaped flowers in shades of white, pink, or red. Some of the most noted members of this genus include blueberries, cranberries, huckleberries, all prized for their nutritional value and culinary versatility. I think we, at one point in time, talked about a trip down to New Jersey to pick up blueberry bushes. I'm still interested in doing that. Should anybody in the group want to go to New Jersey and go down to, I believe it's like Cinnaminson, right? Hamilton. Okay. The picture is a picture of a deerberry, which was one that I was not familiar with, but it is native to PA. I'm going to go out and kind of look for that tree per se. I thought those flowers were quite extraordinary. The members, yeah.
Be aware that it might be called deerberry because the deer really like it. That would be my guess. I mean, we bought strawberry bushes. Jesse found them for us last year. And if we look in our book about native plants, the last thing it says about them specifically is deer candy.
Yes. How are you making out with your strawberry bushes?
They're caged.
Okay.
Knock on wood, and I am actually knocking on wood. So far, they're doing okay. May have to make bigger cages for them or something, but I'll let you know.
I have one that is surrounded by Monarda, and I'm hoping that that's enough to keep the deer away from it.
There's nothing around mine at all, but the cages. So
Wire cages. All right, I'm getting kind of behind schedule here in terms of talking, so I'm going to keep moving. Salixes, the willows, again, we could argue whether or not a willow is a tree or a shrub. For the purpose of this conversation tonight, it's a shrub. So the genus Salix, commonly known as willows, is a diverse group of 350 species of deciduous shrubs and trees. Most species have two kinds of leaves, first leaves emerging from the buds in the spring, and larger leaves growing later in the season. They have separate male and female plants. They are not same species, same sex they do not contain both sexes on the same plant. They have individual male and female plants. Their flowers lack petals and they are wind pollinated. Many willow species are fast growing and reach maturity very quickly. The branches are known for their flexibility and often used in basket weaving and other crafts. Native species, we actually have quite a few native willows. I think that probably the pussy willow, Salix discolor, gets the majority of the attention from the native plant folks. But other willows are useful and, can be breathtaking. An example of one would be this Salix humilis, which is the prairie willow, which I thought was just kind of blown away by these pictures. Is a mounding shrub, 6 to 10 feet tall. It often forms thickets. It's got ascending wand-like branches that are yellow to brown, gray, green to blue-green foliage, has insignificant fall color. Greenish catkins appear before the leaves emerge. It's short-lived, fast-growing, like sun and water, but can handle various conditions. I just thought that the little flowers in the picture on the right were pretty extraordinary. Comments, experiences with Salixes?
We have a lot of silky willow near the wetlands, and that they are very happy, and a lot of critters, pollinators, and an early pollination too. That's a good thing about willows. They provide early sustenance.
Yeah, go ahead, Donna. You started speaking. You're on mute.
Oh, I'm trying so hard to find silky willow. I've been looking everywhere for it.
They had it at 10,000 trees if they have any, but it's really good at live staking too. I can you can cut some of my silky willow and try live staking if you'd like.
That would be so great. That would be really fun. And I would video it and teach people about it. So
Willows are great at that, at live staking.
So just popping through the chat, going back a little bit, Denise mentioned that she was surprised to find out the Virginia pine is one of the most common Christmas trees, at least in North Carolina. They take well to trimming, which means you'd probably have to keep it trimmed to keep it in a hedgerow, but good information. Thank you, Denise. Anything else on willows, black or otherwise? Let's break into perennials. So this is we start talking about, you know, soft wood or woodies, and now we go into perennials. 8 different genuses that we'll talk about. Among them, solidago, the goldenrods, the asters, the sunflowers, the rudbeckias. A couple that I'm not familiar with that were sort of new to me. And so we'll get to them. So first up, you know, in terms of perennial flowers and keystone species, the goldenrods are the kind of king of the keystone perennials. The genus is commonly known as goldenrods. They're a diverse group of flowering plants. They actually belong to the aster family, which I did not know until I started researching this. Primarily found in North America, with few species also occurring in Europe and Asia. They live for multiple seasons, growing from underground structures like woody caudices or rhizomes. Their height can vary greatly, ranging from a few centimeters to over 2 meters. Most species are known for their small clusters of yellow flowers. The flowers are arranged in various shapes. Habitat adaptability. Goldenrods thrive in various habitats, from open fields and meadows to woodlands, mountains, and even swamps. This ecological versatility contributes to their widespread distribution. While few species flower in the spring, the majority of goldenrods come into bloom in late summer and early fall, adding abundant, vibrant bursts of color to the autumn landscape. They are often blamed for hay fever. Goldenrods are actually innocent bystanders. The true culprit behind seasonal allergies are ragweeds, which share similar flowering time but possess the allergic pollen. All I have right now in my yard are Canadian goldenrods, just because they've shown up there, and I did buy a fireworks cultivar of solidago, but I don't have anything that's of real interest in the fireworks. Solidago is taking its time really becoming much of anything.
Oh, but fireworks is awesome. When it matures, you will love it. And golden fleece is fantastic. They're just so pretty, and the branches are so artfully arranged, you wouldn't believe that they're related to that weed, Canada goldenrod. Except from the golden flowers, but they have such a nice form.
I did pick out these 2 out of the list that I was looking at as sort of to add to my wish list. So Solidago odora, which is aniseted, 2 to 5 feet tall. Neat form, rich aniseted leaves. A tea can be brewed from its leaves and dried flowers. It's sunny, prefers moist soils. And this Solidago bicolor, which I thought was super interesting. It's the only species with white rays in the east. It prefers dry, sandy soils, the sun to shade. And the habit on this here is pretty interesting.
Ooh, that is pretty.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. That doesn't look like a goldenrod at all, especially for the white petals.
Right.
It's like crazy in Maine. It's really very nice. And
Oh, really?
Early summer.
Oh,
It's
bring us
kinda
back
late.
some.
It's really nice.
Bring us back some seeds.
Okay, I'll
So-
work on it.
I'm adding that to my wish list. So anybody that comes across it, please keep me in mind.
We should look at Jenkins. They have a lot of unique plants.
Okay.
Let's see, somebody asked me which 2 solidagos I mentioned. Golden fleece is the one, and fireworks Rick mentioned are the 2 that I think have really pretty format. And I don't see blue stem on here. Solidago acacia. That's a really nice goldenrod for shade. It just has single arching stems. It's only about 2 feet high. Very elegant.
I think they're calling it wreath goldenrod, and it is on the list. It's the 3rd.
Oh, sorry, I see cassia. You're right. Wreath. Okay, wreath. I call it blue stem. Yeah, that's a great one for shade. If anybody has woods, they just look, and Jenkins has it. You'll see it on their woodland paths. It just looks so elegant. You would not think of a goldenrod as elegant, but it is.
Sean said he Chelsea chops several times during the summer on some of his goldenrods to ensure they have ongoing blooms. Good advice.
The zigzag goldenrod is a lovely garden plant for shade, and it will be a ground cover. It helps keep out weeds, and it's very short and lovely and not unwieldy.
How tall does it get, Donna?
About 2 feet.
Okay.
That's so perfect. I hope
Yeah.
they come from seed. I'm trying seeds on several of these this year.
That's
Seeds.
fair.
We planted the zigzag from seeds last year and they came up pretty nicely. In fact, we had donated a whole load of them to the plant swap that we did, but they were itty bitty and I nursed them along until they became planting size and stuck them all in one spot. So hopefully,
Oh, lovely.
yeah, they came up very nicely from seeds.
Good. They're all outside in my winter sown patch. So I'm waiting eagerly to see those.
They all bloom the first year, right? You don't have to wait multiple years for goldenrods to bloom, right?
No, I think you do.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I got plugs last year from North Creek and only 1 or 2 from a flat bloomed. I think most of them bloom this year.
Okay.
They take their time to make that root system. They do have, quite a tenacious root system. If you ever try to pull out your Canadas, Rick, you'll see the root system.
I try not to pull anything that's native, but I did go through last year and pull out a couple just to
Canada will take over. It took over my tiny meadow to the exclusion of the grasses. And where I pulled it up last year, I have grasses again.
Yeah.
So I'm not putting up with it anymore. It's too aggressive. I will grow the other goldenrods, but not Canadian.
So
I sold the fireworks last year, and they did all bloom the first year.
Oh,
Bloomed in the pots, and we planted demonstration gardens with them last year, and they all bloomed.
Beth said that Chelsea chops her goldenrods. They're one of her favorites. And Sean added that the fireworks goldenrods next to New England asters is a showstopper found at Bartram Gardens. I love the combination of asters and goldenrods because they're just, it's a perfect thing. I think of, I'm sure Marilyn will, late summers in Maine along the highway, seeing nothing but goldenrods and asters coming into bloom. And that is a combination that I have next to my fireworks. After my fireworks goldenrods, is I did put asters, which is a great lead-in to the next group, which is Symphyotrichum. Right? Did I say that right? Symphyotrichum?
Symphyotrichum, I think.
Symphyotrichum. Not an easy one to say. Let's just call them American asters. It is a diverse group of over 100 species of flowering plants in the Asteraceae family. Formerly classified as asters, these plants are primarily herbaceous perennials or annuals native to this hemisphere. Known for beautiful flower heads, featuring a central cluster of tiny yellow disc florets surrounded by white, pink, purple, or blue ray florets. Interestingly, both discs and ray florets can reproduce, as they contain both male and female reproductive parts. Asters are widely recognized for their late blooming nature, adding vibrant color to landscapes from late summer to fall. Popular examples include New England asters, the New York aster, both favorites in gardens worldwide. So some great asters. I'm starting to notice that New England's can take over pretty quickly in my garden. I think I just got a seed pack. I winter sowed some 2 years ago. I actually made them into the flower beds last year, and by last fall they had grown to such a size that they pretty much shaded out much everything else.
You must not have deer.
You know what? The deer don't seem to bother. They're up close to the house, and I don't think the deer come close to the house.
Okay, because deer will eat New England.
Will they?
They ate mine right away. I have no more. I have Oblogifolia and the Ericoides, the low one. Those are and blue wood. Blue wood seems to survive the deer despite some nibbling.
I have some white wood aster back in the the back of the lot. And the deer don't seem to bother them either. But I also did a little bit of what Maryland did, was I took a bunch of fallen branches and kind of protected them, such that they couldn't easily access them.
Yep. I've been able to shield macrophylla sorry, heartleaf aster
Okay.
from the deer, but they got my whitewood.
So I
Yeah.
thought this, what is this? Is this Whitewood? White Heath. This is White Heath shown,
Ericoides.
Ericoides, which I thought was quite lovely.
Yeah, and that's resistant to deer.
3 foot high, it sort of meets my height requirements.
That can be Chelsea chopped if it's too tall.
Okay. Good to know. Any
Definitely a useful technique.
aster comments on the asters, native asters to our area? Calico asters, I think, are nice. I've seen them in.
Oh, they're fantastic. They are lovely.
I was
they've got-
wondering, and I was looking at, I get a lot of fleabane. Fleabanes aren't part of this genus, are they?
Well, they're a ray flower, but that doesn't mean I know whether they're part of the genus. Let's look it up.
I think they're annuals though, aren't they?
Don't think
Fleabane?
so. Annual plants, Marilyn called it.
Biennials. I'm not-
Fleabanes are erigeron, I think.
Roger on.
And they bloom in the spring versus the asters bloom more in the fall. That's one of the ways you can tell a difference.
And so pollinators are happy with that.
Yeah.
Rick, you're right that they're Asteraceae, but they're erigeron as opposed to Symphyotrichum.
Okay. I didn't realize this, but the Symphyotrichum is actually a two-pager. So the remainder, there's quite a few of these, native to Pennsylvania. So there are some other asters which are also native to PA. I thought the wavy leaf aster was rather aesthetically pleasing. I thought the flower was interesting compared to a lot of the asters that I looked at. It is a host for the pearly crescent butterfly. Gets up to about 5 feet tall and is one of the asters that like dry soils. Final call for any comments on asters. All right, Helianthus, the sunflowers. The genus Helianthus, commonly known as sunflowers, is a group of about 70 herbaceous flowering plants native to North and South America. They are known for their showy daisy-shaped flowers that come in various colors: yellow, orange, red, even purple. Key features include lower leaves are typically oval and heart-shaped, while upper leaves are smaller and narrow. All leaves are arranged alternately on the stems. Some flowers have large flower heads called capitula, which consist of numerous smaller flowers. The outer ring is made of bright yellow ray florets, while the center disc is filled with smaller disc florets, which can be yellow, brown, or maroon. Sunflowers can reach impressive heights, with the common sunflower growing up to 15 feet tall. While the common sunflower is an annual, the genus includes both annuals and perennial species. They are cultivated for their edible seeds, and in the case of Jerusalem artichoke, they sometimes have underground edible tubers. I love sunflowers. I have plenty of them. Another plant that tends to be very tall that I Chelsea chop sort of around the 4th of July. But they are great bird food and bug food. And the birds, I don't chop them back in the winter, and the birds are still eating flowers, seeds from the flowers from last year. Just a super plant. Anybody have experience with sunflowers, good, bad, and different?
I find them very easy to propagate and to grow, and they're hardy. And another major pollinator plant.
Good
But
comment.
the deer eat the sprouts, of course.
Pardon me?
The deer eat the sprouts and the mature plants.
Susan?
Yeah.
You have an issue with, I mean, you really do have more
You
of a
know I do.
problem than most people.
I have a horrible herd of deer. The things I have to do and the things I can't grow. I can grow sunflower only in my fenced vegetable garden, and I do,
Really?
but
So
I
you
really
need to-
miss
You
woodland.
need, you need to have my next door neighbor who goes out and does target practice in his backyard with an extremely loud rifle.
Yeah, I have a hunter, but only in hunting season. It's not,
Oh.
it's not enough.
No, this guy is out. I mean, we haven't seen the deer in like 2 years because this guy is out there also knocking on wood, and he shoots a gun that is so loud that the cats basically just leap straight off my lap. They're so
Ooh.
terrified. It sounds
Oh,
like he's in my back porch. It's that loud.
uh-huh. That's don't know if I want that kind of deterrent or not, but I see the value.
I
I get-
have been looking at a deer resistant list, and every single list is different from every single other list. And some say it's deer candy and some say it's deer resistant. So you can really, it's where you live and what you have.
And what your deer like to eat.
Yeah, right.
It's remarkable.
I agree with Susan that deer tastes can vary from county to county, from town to town. I think that, I have never had a deer touch either my Maximilian sunflowers or my swamp sunflowers. But that does not mean that other people have not had this or have had the same experience.
Maybe I have too much goldenrod and they can't get to the
I like that.
Can't
Yeah,
because of the
you're gonna
golden.
have goldenrod, right? Make it do some work.
Susan Bryce added she loves her Maximilian sunflowers and the birds love them too. And that's been my experience as well, Susan.
Oh my gosh.
I would note that Jerusalem artichoke, I wouldn't encourage anybody to plant it unless you know what you're getting into, because those tubers go everywhere. And if you want to get rid of them, it's virtually impossible. They're awful, awful things if they're somewhere that you don't want them.
You kind of have to take to eating them just to control them.
You might have to eat all of them to control them. Yep, I have them sneaking under a fence every single year, and every year I yank them all out and they're back under.
Yeah, they're
It's a
pretty.
control issue. Yeah.
All right, we ready to move on? Rudbeckias, known for their daisy-like flowers with yellow petals and prominent central cones, commonly called coneflowers or black-eyed Susans. These perennials come in various species and are popular choices for gardens due to their vibrant colors and long blooms. There's really only 4 different native species of Rudbeckia. There are black-eyed Susans, common black-eyed Susans, green conehead flowers, and brown-eyed Susans. I have trouble telling the difference between Rudbeckia flagellata and Herta. Like, it should be obvious, and if anybody should be able to tell the difference, those 2 plants, it should be. I mean, I can tell them. I can't tell them by just looking at the flowers. I can tell them by looking at the foliage, right? So I can see that, that foliage is sort of blue-green versus, the green.
Doesn't Hirta have fuzz on the stems, and Fulgida has smooth stems? I'm not positive on that, but the stems are sometimes a way to tell.
And Herta is usually annuals, right? They're not necessarily perennials.
Probably short-lived.
Okay.
In fact, I think all of these things are short-lived, and they, except for Laciniata, which you can never get rid of again. But the rest of them, I think they just reseed more than the same plant keeping going for years and years. They just reseed themselves.
And if you want to fix your spelling, the last bullet point in the rightymost column, bloom has an extra L.
It does.
Bloom. Just saying.
That's
No,
probably
that's
Dutch
fine.
for flower.
Judy's my spell check.
I
Judy,
should have looked harder through these.
I think we should, Judy. We'll make it.
I just went zip, zip, zip. Yeah,
That's fine. Honestly, I was working on it up until about 10 minutes before the presentation started.
Yeah.
So it's possible, even if you did look at it yesterday, with a discerning eye, you might have missed something that I added 5 minutes before we started.
But if I have permission to edit, I'll just go through and fix them.
You always have permission to edit, Judy. Okay. Here, the next one is one that I am not at all familiar with, and it's the gumweeds. So Grindelia is the genus, not something I'm familiar with. I could only find 2 native species in this genus. And one I'm not even really sure that it's native. The distribution on the Great Valley gumweed seems suspect to me. So if you can see it sort of there in the lower left corner.
Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and nothing else except the West Coast?
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yeah, doesn't that seem sus? Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't believe it. And most of these, there's actually quite a few of them, but very few are native to our area. Only one has sort of widespread representation on the East Coast, and that is the Grindelia squarosa, the curly cup gumweed.
I think you're making that up, Rick. That's such an amazing name. You invented that from Grindelwald and
I
something
think
squirrely.
I mean, I've never seen that in any books.
I have not
Me
either.
neither. I'm looking it up now.
I was completely sort of taken aback by it. And like I said, and I think there were, I don't know, at least a dozen species, and only these 2 popped up as being native to our area. And like I said, the first one is pretty suspect in terms of I don't believe that it's native.
You know what Ladybird says about that is that it is native to the western and southwestern North America, and it's spread eastward in waste places.
Okay.
So I think, as you know, you pointed out, forests were clear cut and ag fields abandoned. Maybe that's where this pops up, but I don't know how the seeds made the cross, over the Great Divide in the Mississippi River.
And didn't drop any in between.
That's a good trick.
In
Because there are no
between,
waste places at all in Missouri, right?
Oh.
I think we don't know enough.
So if anyone discovers it on their property, let us know, right?
Yeah, exactly. We need our plant biologist to explain this to us.
There are 31 bees that use it as a host. So I thought it was very interesting that, like, not even our beekeepers have heard of it. I've never seen it. I'm going to keep my eye out for it. I'd like to, see what it does. It's pretty. Looks a lot like every other aster sunflower yellow plant that we have. I thought the habit on the top picture was very interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't look really familiar.
No.
Right, the whole format of the plant is not something I've seen.
It looks like it would be in drier areas.
It does. So that's what the USDA is saying. Rocky, gravelly soil, disturbed roadsides, adapted to saline conditions.
Right.
Yeah, and it's found in areas inhabited by non-native weeds. So it's definitely a colonizer, a ruderal species, I would say.
Nice.
But how it got here, I don't know.
I'll keep my eye out for it. Planet. This is another one that I don't see a whole lot of popularity. It's the genus is Chrysopsis. And there is only one native species represented here in Pennsylvania, and it is the Maryland gold aster. It's a rather attractive looking species. Provides a low, sturdy rosette effect until late summer, when flowering branches lift clusters of yellow aster-like flowers 1 foot off the ground. The foliage is woolly when young, becoming smoother with age, and the fruiting heads of this perennial are very attractive. Does best in wet, sunny conditions. The Maryland gold aster, Chrysopsis mariana. Beth, you say you have that one?
Yes, she's saying that.
Yes, nice. Sunny, dry spot. Interesting. Okay.
I've seen it,
Sunny wet, I
in some
think.
native plant websites, but I've never seen it in real life, as far as I know. But it is available, I think.
So if you look at the Bon site, it is listed as native and rare. That's what that yellow flag is. And if you see the yellow, sort of is our 5 surrounding counties. So if anybody has it, would like to share it, we would certainly be welcome to plant some and see if we can get that rare status changed. Coreopsis. There's quite a few of these. These are prolific self-seeders. Commonly known as tick seeds, they encompass about 75 to 80 species of flowering plants native to northern, central, and South Americas. They are herbaceous plants known for their vibrant daisy-like flowers, typically bloom in shades of yellow, sometimes feature reddish accents. They generally range in height from 18 to 47 inches, thrive in sunny locations with well-drained soil. They are known for their tolerance to heat, humidity, and drought conditions. Key features include their showy flowers, which are most recognizable, with pointed ray florets and a central yellow disc in similar shades or occasionally with reddish tinges. They are known for their adaptability, tolerating various soil conditions, and thriving in sunny locations. They boast a long blooming period extending from late spring to late summer, easy to care for, and require minimal maintenance and readily propagate through stolons and self-seeding.
And relatively deer resistant.
And deer resistant.
They are. I'm not saying deer proof. I've had lanceolata flower heads snapped off, but the plant recovers quickly.
My lanceolatas are emerging. I'm not sure they ever go dormant, but I was out in the garden poking around and did see evidence of them emerging and starting to come to the surface, which is always a welcome sight this time of year. I do deadhead my tick seeds. I think I get longer blooms out of them. I don't know if anybody else does.
Yes, definitely. Yep. If you keep them trimmed.
Every
Keep
day.
living.
Um,
If you have to.
Does anybody else Chelsea chop these as well midsummer to keep them from flopping?
Haven't, but could.
Yes, Sean says yes.
John says yes.
Oh, and I think somebody, Beth offered to save some seeds for us of the
Chrysopsis.
Chryssopsis. I've got, they seem to move around my yard a lot. I don't know about anybody else, but they seem to just kind of appear and disappear and pop up elsewhere in my yard, which I don't mind.
Which one, lanceolata or?
The lanceolata moves around for me.
I think it's short-lived, and like you said, it reseeds pretty easily.
I do kind of, when they do go to seed, I will drag those. When I do cut them back, I drag the seed heads around the yard. So that's probably why they move around. They don't do it on their own.
That's cool. I don't see verticillata on the list.
It's not native here.
Yeah, that's a shame because it's a great plant.
What one was that, Susan?
Coreopsis verticillata, the what do they call it? Narrow-leafed Coreopsis, maybe. Moonbeam is a recognizable cultivar.
World is another.
Too.
World is another common name for that.
Okay. It has a habit like rosea, but the flowers are yellow instead of pink.
Okay. Good information. Anything else on tick seeds?
Coreopsis lanceolata is our West Vincent pollinator pit stop plant of the year. We do a plant every year, and we give away seeds for winter sowing in January, and we're about to plant a lot of seeds that I got from Ernst, Southeast PA Ecotype, I believe. And I have cold stratifying, I don't know, 20,000 seeds or something. So if anybody wants some seeds, I think we're going to have some left over.
That's fine. Are you coming to Jenkins in April?
No, I am having another event that day.
It's Earth Day weekend, so there's
it's a big weekend.
Yeah. I work in sort of the environmental sector partially, and so I made everyone aware that I'm tied up for Earth Day that Saturday and not available for work meetings.
for other volunteer activities.
Yes. Good. And for Judy's sake, I will note and recognize that there is a typo at the bottom of my slide on prefer.
Okay.
I should just go through your slides while you're doing this and just fix them, but I'll let you do it.
I don't think this, I'm not sure what's going to happen with this presentation when I'm done, but I will fix that. All right, we're closing up, wrapping up. Bidens. So the Bidens is a large genus. There's about 230 species of Bidens. They are also part of the Astraceae family. They're found all over the world. The classification can be very complex. The most recognizable feature is their fruits, which have earned them names like burr marigolds, stick ticks, tick seed sunflowers. They have barbed bristles that cling to your fur or clothes, helping the plant disperse its seeds. They can be annuals or perennials, and their appearance varies. Some have divided leaves with toothed edges and showy flowers with long ray petals, while others have simpler leaves and smaller flowers. Most Biden species have yellow flowers with a central disc of tiny florets, though a few lack ray florets entirely. Bidens are a successfully adapted genus because of their adaptability. They can tolerate a wide range of growing conditions from full sun to parked shade, from dry to moist soils. Some are even aquatic. While some Bidens are considered weeds, a few like Bidens furifolia are cultivated as ornamentals. I don't have a high opinion of Bidens. I'm sure they're ecologically valuable, but I've got a long-haired dog that just
brings the seeds around.
yes. And
Gosh.
he's got fur and it's always, he doesn't like to be brushed, and that's a whole other story. But I do find them a bit of a nuisance. But they are hosts and they are keystone species, so they are important even if they're not my favorite.
Good attitude.
Anybody have comments, good, bad, or indifferent on the tick seeds or the beggar ticks?
I had a hedge that they decided to make a hedge, Biden's frondosa, I think, along my chicken coop.
Okay.
It's along a walkway, and it was 5 feet high, hiding a chain link fence, and the plant is so pretty and the flowers are so pretty. And I have standard poodles, and it's just so awful in the fall, but the rest of the year it looks really nice.
I often wonder, like, is it just like, can you just go through and clip off the flower heads? Like, do you deadhead them? Will it prevent the seed heads from?
It will if you get them all.
Yeah, we cut them and then we spread them in places hopefully the dogs don't go. But
You have places the dogs don't go? Like, there's no places the dogs don't go in my garden.
well, I have deer fence and it works on dogs too.
Okay, good. All right, we're gonna move on. I think we've got 2 left. This is another genus that I wasn't super familiar with.
Oh, I know this one. Tell me to do it. Yeah, I have Verbicina.
Verbicina.
Yes.
So the wing stems, right? So crown beards, they're often called. There's about 350 species of them. There's not a whole lot native to our area. They are also part of the aster family. They can be perennials or annuals. There's a striking resemblance to sunflowers.
They actually look like Helenium because you see the central disc that stands up.
Yes.
I had a friend misidentify it from a photograph as Helenium, and that's what I thought it was until I saw the winged stem, and I thought, oh, that's not Helenium. And I looked it up, and oh, it was wing stem.
It is very interesting. It's an interesting looking plant. I did notice that one of the common names is Indian tobacco. That is not to be confused with Lobelia inflata, right? So the other commonly referred to as Indian tobacco.
Right.
But I thought this one, this also known as yellow ironweed, I thought was the alternifolia. I thought was very interesting looking, and I would like to get myself some of that.
I
It's
will
very
bring
prolific
you
in my yard, and the
plants.
birds love it.
Yes, it goes crazy. It's got a really tenacious root system. Once you have it, I don't give any odds for getting rid of it. So if you have it, I hope you like it. But it does attract lots of birds, lots of butterflies.
What's the habitat for it? Is it dry, moist?
Wherever.
I have no moist habitat anywhere, as you know. I will tell people, but it pops up at the edges, like on the edges of beds, at the edges of my woods. It just suddenly appeared one year. And after I had 1 plant 1 year, I had 10 plants the next year. So I would say half shade and not bone dry, and it seems fine in clay.
Okay.
It's
It
not
will
too
grow in clay.
picky.
I would
It'll
agree.
grow.
Yeah.
It'll spread.
And if you have a drought, it'll droop and look sad. And as soon as the rains come, it'll pop right back up. The drought will not kill it. That I've seen.
Beth added that they are also called frost flowers, which is a term I had never heard. Frost flowers.
Oh, me neither. Because they don't last until frost. I'm trying to remember. They're done. They're done before the asters, I think. Rick, I will dig and bring you some
Oh, I would love
as
that.
soon as
Thank
they
you.
start popping up.
All right.
No
Perfect.
problem.
All right. So that's really the summary of the 20 genus plant, 20 genera of plants that I wanted to go through tonight, and I appreciate everybody. I did have sort of a final thought. As I was preparing this, I did come across this, and it seems that, you know, I'm seeing less and less references to keystone species these days. And I've read in Ptolemy in what was it? I guess Bringing Nature Home sort of mentioned the Jenka hypothesis, which I think is a better model than the Keystone model. So for those of you that aren't familiar, the Jenga hypothesis was formed and created by Peter de Ruyter and et al. Others. It says that ecosystems are complex and not static. And like the game with Jenga, as elements are removed, the importance of other pieces of the puzzle change. It de-emphasizes the roles of single species, as all species are important under the right conditions. I just thought that was sort of an interesting talking point to end on. And, you know, I think the Jenga analogy is great because it not only involves taking pieces away, it also involves adding pieces. And those added pieces can affect the stability of the overall system, which I consider sort of the invasive species that we all deal with from time to time. So I just, you know, thought that would be a good note to end on. We still have some educational opportunities to go through, but I will take a couple minutes for people's thoughts on this Jenga hypothesis and what they think that might mean versus sort of the Keystone model.
Well, it's definitely more integrated.
It is, and you know, it also sort of points to the fact that unlike the Keystone model, where if one species is removed or one Keystone species is removed, the entire thing collapses. This requires sort of a chain of events to happen for the ecosystem to collapse. So that is, you know, one piece of the puzzle is removed. I think sort of like the, you know, chestnuts being a keystone species that were suddenly yanked from the ecosystem of our forests, and how other trees sort of came to play those roles. There is a point where too many pieces are removed and the whole thing collapses, but the point of this is that, you know, the importance of species is dynamic and can change over time. So, any ecologists with us this evening that would like to offer comment? How about non-ecologists with opinions? All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for the Keystone Talk. I appreciate everybody joining us for that. That certainly was interesting for me. I hope people got something out of it. I certainly learned a lot preparing that talk. I apologize for the typos and for maybe not being as smooth as a well-rehearsed presentation. I did put quite a bit of time and effort into this. I also apologize for the look of this slide. I wanted to clean it up today and add it to a third slide. Educational opportunities, there's certainly a lot going on. I have not seen a whole lot of plant sales get rolling yet. I suspect we'll start to see announcements for those over the next month. And they really kind of ramp up right around Mother's Day. I might try to schedule another meeting in April. We have a hookup, but I think I would like to either have something in early May, maybe unofficial, maybe without a presenter, but just kind of meet up, talk about educational opportunities, list some plant sales. if I can't get a meeting together, maybe we'll put sort of a interim newsletter out that provides the list of the plant sales and these educational opportunities. We can go through these one by one. I'm a little,
They'll be in the newsletter.
okay, good.
Yeah, so maybe we don't need to do that. There's a question in the chat about the House bill, the
Okay.
native plants on PA roadsides. Andy, if you're still on, do you want to articulate that question?
I am still on. I didn't want to kind of, if you're not done, we can.
No, that's good. I mean, there's another slide of educational opportunities that I will flip to, but we can certainly talk about, let me find it, call to action.
Okay. Oops. So I did call my state rep, and
Okay.
one of his staff people called me back, and she is actually saw her on a garden tour. Her house was on the garden tour, and she's like a master gardener, and she's on the staff for this my legislator, and she brought up the point that I've heard before, which is if you're putting native plants or like pollinating plants, like say in the middle of an interstate, the question is, are you kind of attracting wildlife that is then kind of doomed to die as it tries to then navigate back across the lanes of traffic? So I'm just kind of curious if other people have heard that and thought about it. What, I have my own thoughts, but I'm just curious what other people think about that.
Sounds to me like an excuse not to do it.
So no, Beth, I think it's a valid concern, right? Certainly, I think that the types of species that are attracted to these types of keystone and native plants that we're promoting are typically bugs and insects, right? Like, I don't know that nobody's going to complain about bugs on their windshield versus a dent bumper from a car. Certainly, I think it would be a concern, but I think that I look along our highways and roadways, and I just see the degradation of that edge environment that I think it is important to recognize that loss of habitat and make an attempt to restore it. And I think that we amongst this group certainly support that message. I think, I don't know how to counter that message. I'd open.
I think it's scarier not to see any bugs on our windshields because there are not any there to hit our windshield.
Right. If
And
you
so we
if
need
you,
to plant natives. I
Right.
mean, there are no bugs. We used to have lots of bugs on our windshields.
and we used to have lots of bugs because the middles of those highways did used to be covered with native plants before PennDOT and everybody else decided that those were somehow hazardous and started to mow it. When highways were even, I hate to say it, but even 30 or 40 years ago, there was not this same mindset of cleaning up the roadsides. You used to be able to walk along roadsides when you could walk along roads without getting hit by traffic and see asters and other, the Bidens and all these natives seeding in and just popping up. Now municipalities think that looks messy and they pay their road crews to mow that down. And the same with PennDOT. They think it's either messy or somehow a traffic hazard. All of the bugs used to live right along these roadsides. And yeah, you used to get bugs on your windshields. And if you drive west now, your windshield's going to be almost clean. I drove west 20 years ago. The windshield was so filthy that every time we stopped for gas, we had to clean the whole thing.
Yeah.
The bugs are not there anymore. They used to live and feed and breed right next to roadsides, and there were still plenty of them. I think our duty is to repopulate those roadsides with native plants. The bugs will come. Some will end up on our windshields. Most won't.
So
Yeah,
the
I'm
question-
looking at Sean's comments, and I think that's kind of what I was thinking too. Like that depends what native plants you're using. Like if you're using grasses, maybe you're less likely to have, say, birds. I think is another concern. And I guess I'm thinking, there are already plants there, and maybe you would increase the number of native pollinators or birds, and some will get hit, but at least you're you're taking a slice off of a bigger pie then.
Exactly. Some get hit, but most won't. And some
But,
of a lot
yeah.
is more than a few of almost nothing, which is what we have now. We have almost nothing in terms of natives along the roads.
Yeah, it's really hard once you've learned to identify invasive species and you're like stuck in a traffic jam on on a highway and you look over and at the median, you're like, oh my God, they're all invasives.
The Callery
Yeah.
deer are starting, the bush honeysuckle are out there. You're right. It's very discouraging.
Yeah.
Andy, I can tell you, I travel a lot for work and I spend a lot of time, behind the windshield, and I fight depression at times just because I see, like I said, the degradation, and I see the bittersweet, and I see, all
yeah.
the trees along the edges just covered in bittersweet, just waiting to die. And I think, these trees maybe have another 4 or 5 years before they're just gone. With the deer pressure, nothing's going to be there to replace it. I think that even though it might not be a perfect solution to mandate the use of native plants, I do feel that it is important to start somewhere. I would like to see some sort of, national work program along the order of, like the Army Corps of Engineers be developed to handle invasive species and the planting of natives. And I also think that heavily planting of natives will also sort of limit the infiltration of the invasive plants in those areas, right? So it's a sort of a twofold attack on those areas, and that is, remove the invasives, plant natives, and hopefully limit the amount of invasives that continue to grow and occupy those regions.
I will say, just to be fair, that she left a message on my machine, so I didn't get to talk to her about it. So I am going to call her back because I'm curious about her fuller thoughts about it. She also seemed a little conflicted, but she brought up the point. Our rep is supporting the bill.
Good.
He's a good guy. So just to clarify, but yeah, I just was really kind of grappling with that.
No, but I think it's, this is the place to have that discussion, right? And to come up with answers, to wordsmith some answers in response. I think that I might not have the answer, but we've got plenty of people here that can help us. I certainly appreciate your efforts, Andy.
And yours. Thank you so much for the presentation. I know it takes a lot of work. I appreciate it.
Rick, it was awesome.
Thank you. I have done talking for the night.
Really
but,
cool presentation.
Now he has to go get a drink.
I was going to put bourbon in this, but I didn't.
Oh, I recommend it. You should.
So I think I just have, that's it. I think we'll run through that second slide of just educational opportunities. Susan, I just wanted to note that I added a couple things to this list. Wild Ones PA of Western PA, they seem to have their stuff together. They are having a second annual symposium, March 14th. It's only a 3-hour symposium, but the fact that they have Ernst on board, Ernst Seeds as a co-sponsor, and they have a venue location, and they have, registration, and I just was like kind of blown away. I would like to get to the point where we're offering symposiums at some point in time.
It's live. I mean, it's in person, not
It's
virtual.
in person. It is
wow.
at a live venue in Pittsburgh.
Wow. Okay.
You can log on to their Facebook page and get details and register. I also noted on March 25th, I added to the list is a native plant Q&A through the Master Gardeners Program of Northampton, Lehigh, Carbon County. It is free, but there is a registration required. It's a Zoom call.
Okay, I can add that to the newsletter.
So that's March 25th. I added it to this list.
Okay, thanks.
And I think I added something. April 6th, I added Keystone Species for Pollinator Gardens. And that is a webinar event sponsored by Mount Cuba, 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. And the cost for that is $19. So that's it. 9:15. I did pretty good. We kept within our 2-hour window. Now let's chit chat.